Today is Tuesday, November 3rd. We will go ahead and go over our Bible books this week. So it's Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians. Again, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, and Colossians. Yesterday's lesson, we discussed how Joseph is now in prison. Remember, Potiphar's wife lied on Joseph and he was thrown into prison. But the Bible tells us that the Lord was still with Joseph. Even though he was in the prison, God was still with him. And Joseph did his work in prison. And the captain of the prison saw how well Joseph worked. And so remember, he put Joseph in charge of all the other prisoners. So God raised Joseph up again. And so we see, from Potiphar's house to Joseph being in prison, how his dreams are they're coming to life, kind of, how God is saying that no matter where Joseph goes, God will raise him up. And we see that the Lord is doing that. And that's why it says that the Lord was with Joseph, because of how God's favor that was on him. And so Joseph is now in prison, and now he's a leader in the prison. So after some time, remember, he met the baker and the butler. They had served King Pharaoh, and they had been recently thrown in prison. And so one day Joseph saw how they looked troubled. It seemed like something was wrong. And so Joseph ended up asking them what was going on. And they told Joseph about how they had dreams that they didn't understand. They couldn't get an interpretation of what their dreams meant. And so they ran into the right person, because God had given Joseph the ability to interpret dreams. It was God who showed Joseph what the dreams meant, but God did it through Joseph. And so Joseph was able to help them understand their dreams. And so the butler tells his dream, and he says how he saw a branch with three vines, like the grapes coming from it. And he said he took one and he squeezed the grapes into Pharaoh's cup, and he gave Pharaoh his cup. And so he was like, what does this mean? And so Joseph said, the Lord said that in 3 days you will actually go back to serve King Pharaoh. You will go back to the palace. You will get your job back. And so then the baker tells him his dream, and he says how he had 3 baskets on his head, and he had some bread and rolls inside of the top basket. And then the birds came and took took the rolls out of the basket. And so his dream did not mean something good like the butler's dream. And so Joseph told him that his dream meant that in 3 days he would actually be executed, that he would not go back to Pharaoh's palace, that he would actually be hanged. And so in 3 days, everything that God had spoken through Joseph happened. The butler went back, served King Pharaoh, and the baker unfortunately was hanged. And so before the butler left, Joseph told him, he said, I was wrongly put in prison. Could you please tell Pharaoh about me and how I helped you and everything? And the butler promised. And I told you that unfortunately, when the butler got back to Pharaoh's palace, he forgot about Joseph. And so we'll start today's lesson from that point on. After some time, Joseph realized that the butler had forgotten all about him because he was still in prison. And so it was actually 2 years before a change came. So one day, King Pharaoh, he was troubled by some dreams that he had. He didn't understand what his dreams meant, and he was greatly troubled. He tried to call all his wise men to come and interpret the dreams to help him understand, but nobody could help Pharaoh understand the dreams that he had. So when this was going on, the butler, 2 years later, remembers that there was someone who helped him when he was in prison interpret his dreams. So you see, it took a little while. It was like 2 years. But remember, God works on his time. And so we may be like, God, could you hurry up? But the Lord does everything at his time, the perfect time. And so at this moment, the butler remembered Joseph. So he tells King Pharaoh, he says, I remember there was a man, a Hebrew man, that helped me when I was in prison with my dreams, and they came to pass. What he said was true. And so he said he could probably help you with your dreams. And so Pharaoh called Joseph to come to his palace immediately so that Joseph could help him out. So Joseph went from being thrown into a pit, being sold as a slave. He was in Potiphar's house working as a slave. He was thrown in prison. And now Joseph is being called by the king of Egypt. Pharaoh is a very powerful king, and he is calling for little Joseph, this Hebrew boy, to come before him to help him out. It's not like Joseph is just going before Pharaoh for any reason. He's going to help the king out. And so we see how God took him. It's like he went through all that bad stuff, but look where God is bringing him before kings. The Bible says that your gifts will bring you before great men. Your gifts will bring you before kings. And we can see that with Joseph. Look at how his gift with interpreting dreams and just being a good worker and all of that, how it's bringing him before King Pharaoh. So Joseph was led into Pharaoh's palace, and he goes before the king, and the king says, I have had 2 dreams that worry me greatly. None of the wise men of Egypt can tell me their meaning. So I have sent for you because I have heard that you can tell me the true meaning of dreams. And Joseph told him, he said, well, the wisdom does not belong to me, but to the God whom I serve. So tell me what your dreams are, what your dreams were, and he will give you the meaning of them. So this was good that Joseph said that, because he wanted to be clear to Pharaoh that it wasn't him, but it was the God that he served that can interpret dreams, which was good because Pharaoh, like the people in Egypt, don't worship the true and living God. And so he called all his wise men, and they couldn't even figure it out. And so Joseph was now going to show him that there was only one God, and only this God could show him his dreams. And so Pharaoh begins to tell Joseph about the dreams that he had. Pharaoh's first dream, he was standing by the Nile River, and he saw 7 fat cows come up out of the river, and then he saw 7 thin, skinny cows come up out of the river, and those skinny cows ate the fat cows, but after they ate the fat cows, they were just as skinny as before. And so then he woke up, and he didn't understand what that meant. But then he had a second dream. In his second dream, he saw some ears of corn. So that's like a corn stalk. If you look on the picture, you can see it. He says one grew, and there were 7 good ears of corn on it. Then another stalk grew, and this one had 7 withered, thin ears of corn. And those skinny ears of corn ate the fat ears of corn, but they were still thin and, withered and dried up as before. And then he woke up again. So he didn't understand what those dreams meant. And they were kind of similar to one another. The fat and the skinny eating the fat. He didn't understand. After Pharaoh told Joseph his dreams, the Lord revealed to Joseph what the dreams meant. And so Joseph told the king, he says, your dreams are indeed wonderful, and both of them have the same exact meaning. He says God was telling him what was about to happen in the land of Egypt. He says the 7 fat cows and also the 7 healthy ears of corn. He said that meant that there would be 7 years of plenty throughout the land. That means the gardens would grow, the fruit trees would bear fruit, there would be a good harvest, they would not run out of food. There would be food would be growing constantly. It would be an abundance of food that would grow during the 7 years. He says, but then the 7 skinny cows and also those 7 thin withered ears of corn, he says that means that after those 7 years of plenty, there would be 7 years of famine. Remember, we talked about what a famine meant. A famine means when there's a shortage of food. So God was speaking to Pharaoh and showing him that they would have 7 years of plenty where everything would be overgrowing in abundance. But then right after that, there will be 7 years of famine. There will be a time when barely anything would grow or nothing would grow at all. This will actually be the worst famine that Egypt will have ever seen. And so the Lord was giving Pharaoh a warning, pretty much, right? And so he wanted Pharaoh to prepare for this famine that would come. So as Pharaoh listened, he agreed that this is what the dreams meant. He was like, you know what? Yeah, that sounds right, And so Joseph said, well, I suggest, he says, you find the wisest man in Egypt to be in charge of the food. During those 7 years of plenty, he should be storing up all kinds of food, preparing for the famine to come. He says that will be the wisest thing to do, so that when the famine comes, you're not trying to find food everywhere. Prepare during those 7 years of plenty. He says, pick a wise man to be in charge of this. And so Pharaoh liked what Joseph had suggested, and he thought about it, and he said, well, there's nobody else to pick, but who? Joseph. And so he says, you are a man filled with the Spirit of God. Why would I not pick you to do that? And so Pharaoh made Joseph, who was a prisoner, let's remember that, ruler over all the land of Egypt. He was in charge of the entire project, the taking care of the food and all of that. He was no longer a slave. He was next in line. So Pharaoh is still the king. He rules over Egypt, but Joseph was second in command to Pharaoh. So now we see how God has raised Joseph up. So the Lord, when he gave Joseph those dreams, the Lord told Joseph, one day I will raise you up high. And this is it right here. And so Joseph went from being a slave, from being thrown in the pit, all of that, in prison. And now he is second in command in Egypt. Lord is with Joseph, and we see that. Look how God has worked all of the bad that Joseph went through, and look at how God just raised him up to this position of authority. And so Pharaoh placed his own ring on Joseph's finger, which gave a sign that Joseph had a lot of authority. He not only did that, but he dressed Joseph in like robes, royal robes. He put a gold chain on his neck and all of that. And so Pharaoh, Joseph was wearing those rags. He was a slave. He was a prisoner. So he wasn't dressing nice. And so now he has nice clothes on. He's wearing gold, real gold. And so not just that, but Pharaoh also gave Joseph a chariot. And wherever Joseph went, the people had to bow themselves before Joseph and say, long live the ruler. So look at that. And so God is good. Sometimes life, may be difficult at times, or we may go through things we don't understand, but God has a bigger plan. He knows the end from the beginning. And so from the moment Joseph was thrown into that pit, God knew where he would take Joseph later on in the future. So Joseph had to go through those things to get to this place. And so God is good, right? He kept Joseph through it all. And now look at that. And so Pharaoh also gave Joseph a lovely palace home, and now he has a wife. And he became famous throughout the land of Egypt. Everybody knew Joseph. And so now he has prosperity and fame. And so day after day, Joseph went throughout the land. When those 7 years of plenty had came, Joseph did his job. He made sure to store food. He made sure that everything was taken care of. They weren't using the food up, but that they were storing just enough food, because those 2 years of famine would come right after that. So during this time, God also blessed Joseph and his wife with 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And so Manasseh's name meant forgetting. And when Manasseh was born, Joseph said, God made me forget all my troubles. So Joseph went through a lot, but God blessed him so much that because of where he was in life now, it's like he didn't even remember all the bad he went through. So that's why he named his son Manasseh. And then his other son was Ephraim, which meant fruitful, because God had caused him to be fruitful in the land of his affliction. Remember, Joseph went to Egypt as a slave, and now look at him. He is blessed and prosperous in this land of Egypt. So at last, the 7 years of plenty ended, and then the 7 years of famine began. But guess what? They were fine in Egypt because they had prepared for this famine. Everything was good. They had food in their storehouses. But the famine also hit not only Egypt, but all the land around Egypt. So that was also including the promised land. Now remember, Joseph's family is in the promised land. His 10 brothers that sold him. Also his father Jacob is in the promised land. And they will be affected by this famine. So guess where they will have to go to try to find food? To Egypt. So tomorrow we will talk about that, how his brothers will go and visit Egypt. So that's our Bible lesson for today.